What I want to do is, in a particular way, address particular interests I think that I know we have in School of Media Art and Design with theory and practice, but I know that that goes way beyond that. In fact, it's such an interest that we have. It's a kind of mantra that we have. We are theory and practice people, you know. And I think every time you hear a mantra, you should be suspicious, because you might think that the mantra could just lead to that failing to be interrogated. And I think Ken's done a great job by opening up that interrogation to our mantra. I'm also very interested in the kind of teaching that brings together theoretical research and practical research. And I've worked with Eddie to develop a mixed media dissertation, which we're very proud of, or I'm very proud of. I didn't think Andy doesn't mind it too much either. And even some students do it and work together on it. And also another context for this is the idea of assessment, theory, practice assessment. And with my colleague, great colleague, Eddie McMillan, we've been involved in making film essays, which is a new area for me. But it resonates with an issue that has been there in my education history for a long time, and that's what are the assessment criteria? We have assessment criteria for theory, we have assessment criteria for practice in School of Media Art and Design, and it works well. There's no doubt about that. It helps to create some of the transparency that Goran was talking about. But just to put it in context, we are hatching a plan, it goes by way of a bit of a warning, to develop a module on the film essay, where the film essay will be a creative object, given lots of agency and autonomy given to students, but that it would be capable of being assessed by the theoretical criteria alone. So I'm actually doubting some of those criteria. Anyway, to go back to the big questions, echoing Goran again, who am I? What am I? Where am I going? If that's GOGAF, you know your art history, and it's a kind of tenet of modernism, this focus on the self. And I guess that's what we're doing with our students. We're getting to ask the big questions. It's a hermeneutics, it's a kind of meaning-making process. But of course, they have another question, and what mark do I get when they've done all this, you know? So I wanted to sort of to raise that. And a trick that I've learned in teaching creativity, and it goes back to the vulnerability and the sort of issues that Karen was talking about, and the vulnerability that Goran was also talking about in a way, and that's the idea of a kind of creative space. But one of the tricks I've learned is when I first came into it, I thought I had to do it all, you know? And then I realised there were some pretty talented people around me, and it'd be quite a good idea for me, for my own sanity, if I let them do it. And so actually the idea of a creative space. So what I've tried to do by presenting my own research, which is literally stuff that you've got there, is actually use that and the creative space as an opportunity of what Ken set up and the kind of security, nice cups of coffee, we know why we're here, we've given some time, and our collective talent to be the trick of this. So what I want to ask you to do is to look at this stuff. I want you to look at it. You're all used to looking at stuff in your own ways. You'll create your own stuff, so it might be that you kind of connect with the stuff through your creation of it. It might be you connect with it because it has some connection with what you teach. Even more interesting, you might not connect with it at all, which you might lead to all sorts of things. And that you also enter into perhaps some kind of discussion. What's this about? What's this mean? What's he playing at? Yes? What's he doing? But out of that, we might get to some of the notion of where is the research? How is this research? This is artifacts, this is evidence, this is stuff. It's not the process, it's the stuff of the process. But in some way, I think there's some research there. And what is the practice? Well, it's the stuff of the practice. The practice is doing and the stuff develops from it. So again, it's kind of evidence. It's kind of what Jacquetta Hawkes might call fossils of the psyche, yes? These are somehow sort of fossils of my psyche, things that have happened, that have gone past. It's like a track. Like when a kid makes a drawing, they don't necessarily make an image. They talk their way through it, you know, boom, bang, something happens. What you get in that drawing is not so much an aesthetic object, perhaps, although that's arguable. What you get is a kind of journey of thought, a kind of process, or something that reflects that, like a footprint. As an indexical connection with a foot, so a drawing might have an indexical connection with a thought. And then, is there a pedagogy? What I'm doing here has been, for good and for bad, fundamental to my pedagogy, and fundamental to my way of thinking about pedagogy, and fundamental to the curmudgeonly attitude I take to much of what's happening in current education. So, title, Imagined-Ed Education, which comes from Beckett, as Goran will know. Even, Wallace Stevens says, even the end of the imagination has to be imagined. Who are we? What are we? Where are we going? And what marks do we give? Could be the other title. Where's the research? What's the practice? Is there a pedagogy? Or do you want to talk about something else?
Bryan, can you talk about dead education? What do you mean dead education?
Well, I'm not sure what I mean by it. I like the phrase. I love that phrase, imagine, dead, imagine, because it seems to have a sort of tautology built into it, you know, and Wallace Stevens thinks even the end of the imagination has to be imagined. And we can be quite miserable when we imagine the end of things. You know, Yeats said about the fairies, I think, that they were forever going and forever not gone. You know, and there is something, I don't want to sound complacent because I do think education is really under threat. And I do think some of the really great things about education are really under threat. And if I see myself as a teacher, I see myself in a tradition of teaching, and I think some of that tradition of teaching is under threat. But at the same time, I'm not just pessimistic, I think. So that's imagined-ed education. I think we do need to imagine that what we're participating in is something bloody awful. But we also need to envision that what we're participating in is something that could be absolutely fantastic and should be absolutely fantastic. And it's our job as individual teachers to subvert whatever we think gets in our way in relation to that, almost at whatever the cost.
What are the particular threats you're thinking of? Obviously, there's quite a few. I wonder what you're thinking of.
The particular ones, commodification, homogenization, uniformity, surveillance, control, mediocrity, over-content, the fact that we're all, the hyper-acceleration. Let's just say hyper-acceleration. We live in a hyper-accelerated world where we're expected to do more and more in less and less time, and where the average condition of the worker, including the academic worker, is precariousness. And we pass that precariousness on to our students, so they feel precarious, they don't feel confident, they don't know where they are, and they suffer in the same way that we do. So yeah, I'm going to say hyper-acceleration.
Bryan, can I just ask you about your methodology here? Why did you want to set it up in this way?
Yes. I think because it's very hard, the materiality of what we do when we make things is incredibly important. And actually you can show pictures of it or you can talk about it, but none of that is as good, or it's quite worrying if it is as good as the materiality of what one makes. And I've become much less sure about what is research and what is practice in my work, in a sense. I'm much more interested in surprising myself rather than, I think there was a time when, I'm going to gabble a bit here, but the fashion in art was to make work that couldn't really be talked about. So when I first went to art school and wanted to know stuff, people would say to me, oh, you kind of should know that. If you can't kind of feel that form back through that leg, then I don't really think you should be here because you're not quite aesthetic enough. That was the kind of sub-thing, you know. Then we had the thing where it sort of shifted as much as it could shift in sort of the 80s and 90s, where you had the kind of thing that, okay, of what is your piece of art an illustration of theory, yes? Which theory is your piece of art actually illustrating? Because theory is kind of it has the primacy here. The written word, even though we pretend it's a university and you can do art at university now, the written word still has primacy. So of what is your art a theory? Or which quotes are you illustrating? And for me, both of those fail. I suppose I'm more interested in kind of surprising myself now. And in curating myself out of what I read, what I look at, what objects I like, and what images I make. And so the art that I'm making is, in a sort of very simplistic way, instead of pointing this way, is now trying to point that way, or over there, or how about that and that? You know, so it's become, and I think that's one of the things we can do with students actually, because I think it's not unusual for students to think that they have some expressive energy they must have. They have to be like some Kurt Cobain or you know, some sort of suffering poet in a sense. And actually the answer might be that to just go find something interesting. Go look at, find out what you're interested in. When you find out what you're interested in a sense you are finding something internal, and over time that does sort of become internal as well. So yeah, I like an art that kind of falls off the wall, yeah. But you're very lucky to be able to touch it, I have to say, because I'm usually incredibly defensive about it, and there's a few wrists I wanted to slap as I was going around, but I didn't.